The sky of the alien world stretched wide, painted in deep green and golden clouds. The land was silent except for the soft hum of strange insects hidden in the thick grass. Humanity had sent explorers before, but no one had come back from this place. Now a new human team had landed, carrying one goal only. They had to repair the old transmitter that stood on the horizon like a forgotten tower. Without it, humanity's fleet could not be called, and the coming war would be lost. Tom walked across the uneven ground, his boots sinking slightly into the moss. He was a mechanic, not a soldier, but he carried more weight on his shoulders than the armed men around him. Everyone in the team knew that the survival of the mission depended on him. The transmitter was not human-made. Its design was alien, smooth, and strange, filled with curves instead of sharp angles. Most of the crew could not even understand how the parts fit together. Only Tom had the skill to learn quickly and try. The tower loomed ahead. It was tall and broken at the top, its surface cracked by years of storms. Thin streams of energy flickered along its surface like veins under the skin. Tom placed his hand on the cold metal and felt a weak vibration under his glove. The machine was alive, but barely. He looked at it with a mix of awe and fear. Somewhere in its design, he could sense intelligence greater than human, something that had built this place long before he was born. The commander of the team, a strong man named Paul, gave a short order. "Set the camp here. Tom, you start when ready." The soldiers spread out, placing detectors and lights around the area. Tom did not waste time. He opened his tool bag, laid down his instruments, and stared at the panel that seemed to serve as the control door. It had no bolts or screws, only smooth lines. He pressed on it carefully, and the surface rippled like water, then parted to reveal a dark cavity filled with glowing rods and shifting shapes. He almost forgot to breathe. He had never seen anything like it. He began to work slowly, drawing sketches in his notebook, marking the connections. Hours passed. The wind grew colder, and the two moons rose above the land. The soldiers took turns on guard duty while Tom remained inside the alien machine. Sparks flashed as he adjusted the rods with his tools, trying to restore the power. His hands grew tired, but his mind stayed sharp. Every small success gave him strength. A faint hum grew louder in the tower, a sign that life was returning. Yet Tom was not alone. From the shadows of the tall rocks near the camp, eyes watched him. They were not human eyes. They belonged to a figure hidden in a cloak of deep silver, tall and graceful. The figure's gaze stayed fixed on the mechanic. She had seen humans before, long ago when her world was young, but this one was different. His patience, his focus, his refusal to give up reminded her of something ancient. She remained hidden, studying him in silence. The next morning, the team ate simple rations while Tom checked his notes. His face was marked with grease and dust, but his eyes shone with determination. He told Paul that progress was being made, but the transmitter's core was badly damaged. It would take many days to stabilize. Paul nodded, trusting Tom, though worry was clear in his expression. They all knew time was running short. Enemy fleets could arrive at any moment, and without the signal, Earth would never know. Tom returned to his work, and once again the hidden figure watched him. She remembered the days when her people had built wonders like this transmitter. She remembered how her kind had ruled the skies and oceans. She also remembered the war that had broken them, leaving her alone as the last queen of her line. Centuries had passed, and no one had spoken to her in truth. Yet this human, though unaware, was repairing her people's creation with a care that stirred her heart. By the third day, Tom had entered deeper into the machine. The inside was like a maze, filled with glowing tunnels and strange flowing energy that moved like liquid light. He had to crawl through narrow spaces, his tools clattering against the floor. Once he slipped, nearly falling into a pit where blue energy swirled like fire. He caught himself just in time, his breath racing. Still, he pressed on, for failure meant doom for all of them. At night, when the others slept, Tom stayed awake with his small lamp, drawing plans and adjusting circuits. His hands were blistered, but he worked with steady focus. Sometimes he thought he heard whispers in the wind, soft and distant, almost like a woman's voice. He shook his head, telling himself it was only his mind playing tricks. Yet the feeling of being watched never left him. The hidden queen moved closer on the fourth night. She stepped silently between the rocks, her cloak flowing behind her. She stood near the edge of the light where Tom's lamp glowed. She saw the sweat on his brow, the determination in his eyes. She felt the old power of her people stir again. For the first time in centuries, she whispered softly in her own tongue, words meant not for fear but for recognition. Tom did not understand the language, but he felt a shiver run through him, as if the machine itself had spoken. The next morning, the soldiers found new cracks in the tower. The storm of the planet was rising, sending sharp winds across the camp. Paul told Tom to be careful, but Tom only nodded. He knew the machine had to be ready before the storm destroyed it completely. As the winds howled, he climbed the side of the tower with ropes and tools, working against the force of nature. His fingers bled as he forced pieces of the machine back into place. He shouted orders to the soldiers below, asking for parts, for support, for more light. From the distance, the queen watched again. She saw him hang from the side of the transmitter, refusing to let go even as the storm cut across his face. He reminded her of the heroes of her people, warriors who had stood when all seemed lost. She felt her chest tighten with a strange warmth. Something she thought lost forever was returning. By the end of the fifth day, the transmitter gave its first strong pulse. The tower shone with bright light, and the ground trembled slightly. The soldiers cheered, but Tom only smiled weakly, knowing there was much more to do. Still, he felt pride. He had brought life back to something that seemed beyond repair. That night, when the storm calmed, the queen stepped closer than ever. She stood at the edge of the camp, hidden in the shadows of the firelight. Her eyes rested on Tom as he sat by the fire, his hands still stained with work, his body slumped with exhaustion. He looked up suddenly, as if sensing her. For a brief moment their eyes met, though he did not see her fully. She pulled back quickly into the dark, her heart racing. She knew then that the time of hiding would not last. Soon, she would have to step into the light. And so the first step of their strange connection had begun. The human mechanic had breathed life into the broken signal, and without knowing it, had awakened the attention of the last alien queen. The sixth day began with a pale light spreading over the alien horizon. The camp looked tired. The soldiers moved slowly, and their faces showed worry. They had been on edge since arriving. Strange sounds had haunted the nights, and the endless storm had torn at their nerves. Yet Tom worked without pause. He stood once again inside the tower, his hands buried in glowing wires, his face set with the same determination as always. The soldiers whispered among themselves that the mechanic was different. He was not trained for war, yet he showed no fear. He seemed to belong inside the machine, as though he had always known its secrets. Even the commander, Paul, found himself watching Tom with respect. But Paul also feared something unseen. He often scanned the hills around them, his hand resting on his weapon. Far beyond their sight, the queen prepared herself. For many nights she had stayed hidden, watching in silence. But she knew the time had come to reveal her presence. She was not afraid of humans. Long ago, she had spoken with them, and she had learned of their courage. Yet she had never expected to see one who could stir such old memories in her heart. Her cloak flowed around her as she walked toward the camp. The air seemed to bend as she moved, her steps quiet but full of power. She carried no weapon. She carried only the weight of her past and the decision to no longer remain a shadow. Tom was tightening a crystal rod inside the transmitter when a shout came from outside. Movement at the east ridge. The soldiers raised their rifles, pointing toward the rocks. Paul barked orders, and the camp sprang to life. Tom crawled out of the machine, wiping his face with a cloth, just as a tall figure stepped into the open. The queen stood with the wind rushing against her cloak. The firelight caught her face, and the humans froze. Her skin shimmered faintly with silver, and her eyes glowed like twin stars. She looked both human and not, graceful yet fierce. No one dared to fire. Her presence alone commanded silence. Paul raised his weapon slightly higher. "Identify yourself," he said firmly. His voice held authority, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. The queen lifted her head. Her voice was calm yet powerful, each word clear though her lips shaped a language unknown. To their surprise, the words changed, becoming human speech, though heavy with accent. "I am the last queen of this world. I watched your work. I know why you are here." The soldiers shifted uneasily. Some whispered, others gripped their weapons tighter. Tom stepped forward, his tool belt still hanging at his side. He felt no fear, only curiosity. "You were watching?" he asked. The queen's eyes rested on him. Her gaze was steady, as though she looked past his flesh into the core of who he was. "Yes. I saw you bring life back to the tower of my people. I saw your hands bleed as you worked. You remind me of what my people once valued most." Paul moved between them quickly. "We are not here to interfere with your world. We only need the transmitter to call our fleet. When the job is done, we will leave." The queen tilted her head slightly. "Your presence does not offend me. But the tower is not just a tool. It is a relic of my people, built with hope and sacrifice. You do not know what it truly carries." The soldiers looked at one another nervously. Tom felt something stir in his chest. He wanted to ask her many questions, but Paul gave him a sharp glance, warning him to stay quiet. Still, Tom could not resist. "Then teach me," he said softly. The queen's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile but something close. "You are willing to learn, mechanic?" Tom nodded. "If it helps save lives, yes. If it brings this transmitter back, yes." The soldiers shifted again, uncomfortable with the strange connection forming before their eyes. Paul finally lowered his weapon, though he kept it ready. "If you mean no harm, you may stay. But understand this: we are at war, and trust does not come easy." The queen gave a slow nod. "I do not seek to harm you. My people once made war until it consumed us. I have no wish to see that repeated." That night, the queen sat near the fire with them. The soldiers watched her carefully, whispering among themselves. Tom sat across from her, holding his notebook filled with sketches of the transmitter. He asked questions, and for the first time she answered. She told him the tower was not only a signal device. It was also a guardian. Deep within it was a memory core, a record of her people's history. To restore the transmitter fully, he would have to align not only the power lines but also the memory crystals. If done correctly, the tower would not just send a message. It would awaken the hidden strength of the planet itself. Tom listened carefully, drawing notes with quick strokes of his pencil. He felt as if he were a student again, but this teacher was not from his world. He asked about the crystals, and she guided him with calm gestures, explaining which shapes resonated with which energies. Her words were strange but somehow clear. He realized she was not only sharing knowledge. She was sharing trust. Paul remained silent through most of the night, but he never took his eyes off her. He could see the way she looked at Tom, not as an outsider but as something more. It unsettled him, yet he could not deny that her help made progress faster. The next day, Tom entered the tower again, but this time the Queen followed. The soldiers grew restless, but Paul ordered them to hold. Inside the tower, Tom crawled through narrow tunnels while the Queen moved gracefully beside him, as if the machine itself welcomed her. She pointed at a cracked crystal, and he replaced it with one of the spares he had fashioned from the material they had found nearby. Together they worked in silence, yet their silence was not empty. Tom could feel her presence beside him, steady and unshaken. For the first time, he did not feel alone inside the vast machine. At midday, they reached the central chamber of the transmitter. A large sphere floated in the middle, glowing faintly with shifting light. Tom touched it with caution, but the Queen placed her hand on it without fear. The sphere pulsed brighter, filling the chamber with warm light. For a brief moment, Tom thought he heard voices echoing through the chamber, like songs carried on the wind. "This is the memory core," the Queen said softly. "It holds the last voices of my people. With your skill, you can restore it. With your courage, you can protect it." Tom swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. He was only a mechanic, yet she spoke as though he carried the fate of more than his own kind. He nodded and began adjusting the supports around the sphere. Outside, the soldiers kept watch. Strange shadows moved on the hills, and Paul ordered them to stay alert. He feared that the Queen's appearance was not the only surprise this planet held. By evening, Tom and the Queen emerged from the tower, their clothes marked with dust and their hands blackened from work. The soldiers stared as the Queen walked beside him, her silver skin glowing under the fading sun. Paul stepped forward. "Progress." Tom gave a tired smile. "We're closer. The core is waking." The Queen added, "But the task is not yet done. The storm grows stronger, and others may soon come. You must be ready." Her warning hung heavy in the air. The soldiers exchanged nervous looks. Tom tightened his grip on his tools, his mind racing with both fear and hope. He felt that the true test had not even begun. And though he did not know it yet, the Queen's gaze lingered on him longer than anyone else. In her heart, she was beginning to see not just a mechanic, but something far greater, something she had thought lost forever. The camp stood quiet under the heavy sky. The soldiers worked with their usual discipline, but every man felt the change since the Queen had revealed herself. They spoke in low voices, keeping one eye on the transmitter and one eye on her. Some saw her as a threat, some as an ally, but all felt the weight of her presence. She was not simply another alien. She was something greater, a being who carried history in her steps and fire in her gaze. Tom spent the morning inside the transmitter, his hands black with soot, his mind racing through new ideas. With the Queen's guidance, the machine was slowly returning to life. He adjusted the lines that carried energy, replaced broken shards, and realigned the great sphere at the core. Each spark that returned to the tower filled him with pride. He did not say it aloud, but he felt closer to the machine than ever before, as though it were speaking back to him. The queen walked near him, her silver cloak brushing against the walls. She moved with purpose, her hands touching the surface of the alien structure as though she could sense its heartbeat. At times she would point, showing Tom where to focus, and each time he followed her advice, progress came faster. He never said it aloud, but he began to trust her completely. Outside, Paul studied the hills with his binoculars. He did not like how quiet the land had become. The strange insects had stopped their humming, and the wind carried a sharp scent that reminded him of burning metal. He felt danger creeping closer, though he could not yet see it. By midday, dark clouds gathered again. Lightning flashed far away, and the ground shook under low rumbles. The storm was returning, fiercer than before. The soldiers secured the camp, driving posts into the ground and tying ropes between the shelters. Paul ordered the guards to double their watch. Inside the tower, Tom wiped his brow. Sweat mixed with dust ran down his face. He glanced at the queen, who stood calm despite the storm. "This will hold, won't it?" he asked. Her glowing eyes met his. "It will, if you do not lose heart." Her voice steadied him, and he turned back to his work. Hours passed. Sparks burst around him, and the roar of thunder echoed through the hollow chamber. At one point, a surge of power jolted through the machine, throwing Tom to the ground. He groaned, but he pulled himself back up, gripping his tools again. He would not stop now. The soldiers watched from outside, their nerves stretched tight. Some whispered that the mechanic was risking too much. Others whispered that the queen was using him. Paul silenced them with a sharp order, but even he felt his chest tighten with worry. Then it happened. The storm struck full force. A bolt of lightning tore through the sky and smashed into the tower. The ground shook, and a great crack spread along the side of the transmitter. The camp fell into chaos. Soldiers scrambled to secure their posts while the wind tore at their tents. Inside the tower, Tom clung to a beam as debris fell around him. Sparks rained from broken rods. The queen stood firm beside him, her cloak whipping in the wind, her hand pressed against the core sphere. She shouted over the noise. "It must be stabilized now or it will collapse." Tom's heart pounded, but he moved without hesitation. He crawled across the shaking floor, gripping tools with bleeding hands. He tightened the crystal lines, forcing them back into alignment. The storm screamed louder, and the ground quaked, but he refused to stop. He locked one piece into place, then another, until the hum of the machine grew steady again. At last, with one final strike of his wrench, the transmitter flared with bright light. The storm seemed to pause, as though the planet itself held its breath. Energy surged up the tower, and the crack in its side sealed with glowing lines. The soldiers outside stared in awe as the structure lit the sky like a second sun. Tom slumped to the floor, his chest heaving, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had done it. Against the storm, against the fear, he had brought the machine back. The queen stepped forward, her eyes shining brighter than ever. She looked at him not as an outsider but as something much greater. Then, in front of the soldiers, in front of the commander, she spoke words that shook them all. "That is my husband." Silence fell across the camp. The soldiers froze, staring at her in disbelief. Paul's mouth opened, but no words came. Even the storm seemed to quiet for a moment, as if the world itself had heard her declaration. Tom blinked, stunned. His mind raced, searching for words, but none came. He had been called many things in his life: mechanic, worker, fool, but never husband to a queen. He stammered, "What did you just say?" The queen stood tall, her cloak flowing, her eyes steady on him. "By the custom of my people, the one who restores life to what was broken, the one who gives without fear, is bound to me. You risked yourself for this tower, for this world, for more than your own kind. That makes you my chosen." The soldiers erupted into whispers. Some laughed nervously, others looked horrified. Paul stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You cannot simply claim him. He is human. He is part of my crew." The queen turned her gaze to Paul, her voice calm but firm. "I do not claim him as property. I honor him as partner. In my people's law, he has shown the spirit that binds two lives as one. You may not understand, but this is the truth of my kind." Tom stood slowly, his legs shaking. "I didn't ask for this," he said weakly. Her eyes softened. "I know. But destiny is rarely asked for. It is chosen by action, not by desire." Paul clenched his fists, torn between anger and confusion. The soldiers looked to him for guidance, but he had none to give. He turned away, muttering orders to secure the camp again. The storm had passed, but the air felt heavier than before. That night, the camp sat in uneasy silence. The soldiers kept their distance from the queen, their eyes wary. Tom sat alone near the fire, staring into the flames. He turned the queen's words over in his mind, unable to push them away. He did not believe in prophecy, nor in destiny, but when she had spoken, something inside him had stirred. The queen approached him quietly. She sat across the fire, her face calm. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Tom sighed. "Why me? I'm just a mechanic. I fix things, that's all." Her voice was soft. "And that is enough. My people destroyed themselves because they forgot the value of one who builds instead of breaks. You remind me of what we lost. You risked yourself when you could have walked away. That is why I chose you." Tom shook his head. "I don't even know your name." She looked into the flames. "My name has not been spoken in centuries. But you may call me Queen, until the time is right." He leaned back, overwhelmed. He wanted to argue, to push away the weight of her words, but deep down, a part of him felt something he could not explain. A bond had formed, not by choice, but by fire and storm. As the night grew darker, the soldiers whispered in their tents. Some feared the queen's claim, some laughed at it, but all knew the mission had changed. The transmitter was nearly ready, but now their mechanic carried a title none of them could ignore. And above them, the stars seemed to burn brighter, as if watching the strange union of man and queen. The transmitter glowed with a steady hum, its tall shape now alive with flowing lines of light. The camp no longer looked like a forgotten outpost. It looked like the beating heart of the world. The humans had hope again, for the tower was ready to send a signal strong enough to call their fleet. Yet hope brought danger, for light in the dark always drew unwanted eyes. The queen stood at the edge of the camp, her silver cloak trailing against the soil. She had spoken her truth before all of them, naming Tom as her chosen. Some soldiers still whispered about it, shaking their heads in disbelief, but no one dared to question her openly. Paul kept his men focused on their duties, though he felt tension growing like a storm inside the ranks. Tom worked at the base of the transmitter, tightening the last connections. His body ached from days of labor, but he pushed on. The Queen's declaration still echoed in his mind, confusing and heavy, yet he refused to let it slow him. The mission mattered more than anything else. Without the signal, Earth's fleet would never arrive, and the enemy would win. As the sun sank below the jagged horizon, a sharp alarm rang from the detectors. One of the soldiers shouted, "Movement in the sky." The camp rushed to alert. Paul grabbed his binoculars and looked upward. Against the fading light, black shapes moved across the clouds. At first, they looked like shadows, but soon the truth was clear. Enemy ships were descending. "Positions," Paul ordered, his voice cutting through the fear. The soldiers grabbed their rifles and ran to the perimeter. The camp turned into a fortress of ready weapons. Tom dropped his tools and looked to the Queen. Her eyes burned like fire. "They come for the transmitter," she said. "How do you know?" Tom asked. "Because I would have," she answered simply. "This tower is the key. Without it, your people are blind." The first ship broke through the clouds with a roar. It was sleek and sharp, black metal with glowing red lines across its surface. More followed behind, spreading in formation. The air vibrated with their engines. The soldiers opened fire as the ships drew near. Blue bolts of energy shot from human rifles, striking the enemy hulls, but the ships moved fast, twisting away. Red fire returned, crashing into the ground around the camp, shaking the earth with explosions. Tom ducked behind the transmitter, covering his head. The Queen stood tall, her cloak whipping in the wind. She raised her hand, and the air shimmered. A barrier of silver light formed around the tower, blocking the blasts that came too close. The soldiers stared in awe but kept fighting. Paul shouted orders, directing their fire toward the weakest ship. At last, one of the enemy crafts burst apart in flames, crashing into the distant hills. The men cheered, but the Queen's face remained hard. "This is only the beginning," she said. More ships circled overhead. From their bellies, small figures dropped, armored and armed. The enemy soldiers hit the ground running, weapons glowing in their hands. The human soldiers met them with gunfire. The camp turned into a battlefield of smoke, fire, and shouts. Tom grabbed his wrench, the only weapon he had. He wanted to fight, but the Queen placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not with weapons. With your hands. The transmitter must be completed now. If you fail, all of this is lost." Tom swallowed his fear and nodded. He ran back inside the machine, the roar of battle echoing behind him. Sparks rained as he worked, his hands trembling but steady enough to adjust the final rods. Every second counted. Outside, the Queen stepped into the fight. She moved like a storm given form, her cloak flashing silver as her hands sent waves of energy through the enemy ranks. With a single gesture, she raised walls of light that shielded the soldiers. With another, she sent blasts that knocked enemies from their feet. Her presence turned the tide, giving the humans a chance to stand. Paul fought at the front, his rifle never still, his voice steady as he called to his men. Yet he could not deny the truth. Without the Queen, they would already be broken. He glanced once at Tom inside the tower, and for the first time, he hoped the mechanic could finish what he had started. Inside the transmitter, Tom pushed deeper. The central sphere pulsed weakly, not yet ready to send the call. He connected the last lines, sweat pouring down his face. His hand slipped, but he gripped the tools tighter. He remembered the Queen's words. "Do not lose heart. A sudden blast rocked the tower. Debris fell, striking the floor near him. He stumbled but kept working. Another blast shook the walls. He shouted in frustration, banging the stubborn rod into place with the flat of his wrench. At last, the sphere pulsed brighter, its glow spreading through the entire chamber. Outside, the queen felt the change. She smiled faintly, then turned her attention back to the fight. She moved with speed, striking down enemies before they reached the tower. The human soldiers fought harder beside her, their fear replaced with fire. But the enemy would not give up. More ships descended, and heavier weapons came alive. A great cannon aimed directly at the transmitter, glowing red with charging power. Paul saw it and shouted, "They mean to destroy the tower." The queen raised both hands, summoning all her strength. A wall of light formed before the cannon, but she trembled under the force. Her eyes burned brighter, but her body shook as if the weight of the world pressed against her. Tom heard the sound of the cannon building outside. He worked faster, slamming the final crystal into place. The sphere flared like a star, sending streams of light up the tower. The ground shook, and the hum turned into a roar. "Come on," Tom whispered, tightening the last bolt. The transmitter lit the sky. A beam of pure energy shot upward, piercing the clouds, reaching into space itself. The signal had been sent. Humanity would hear. The enemy cannon fired at the same moment, striking the queen's barrier. The blast exploded against her shield, shattering it into fragments of light. She fell to her knees, her strength nearly gone. The soldiers rushed to protect her, but the enemy pressed harder, desperate to stop the signal. Tom burst from the tower, his face covered in dirt and sweat. He ran to the queen and caught her before she fell completely. "It worked," he said breathlessly. "The signal is out." Her eyes opened slowly, glowing faint but steady. She touched his face with her hand. "You have done what even my people could not. You have given life back to what was lost." The battle still raged around them. Paul shouted for the men to hold, and they did, fighting with all they had. But now they had hope, for they knew reinforcements would come. The enemy began to retreat, their ships pulling back as the transmitter's light filled the sky. They had failed to stop the signal. Their soldiers fired one last volley before fleeing to their crafts. Within minutes, the sky was clear again, though smoke still rose from the battlefield. The humans stood among the wreckage, tired but alive. Paul lowered his rifle and let out a long breath. The men cheered weakly, raising their weapons in victory. Tom still held the queen, who leaned against him with weary strength. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she allowed herself to smile. "My husband," she whispered, not as a command but as a truth she believed with all her being. Tom's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to say he was only a mechanic, but the words caught in his throat. She had nearly given her life to protect the transmitter, just as he had given his to repair it. He realized that perhaps the bond between them was not as strange as it seemed. As the soldiers gathered, Paul approached. His face was hard, but his voice was steady. "The signal is sent. Reinforcements will come. But until then, we must be ready for another attack." The queen straightened slowly, her strength returning. She looked at Paul with calm eyes. "We will be ready. Together." The camp stood stronger than before. They had survived the storm, the battle, and the first wave of the enemy. Now all that remained was to hold until help arrived. And though no one spoke it aloud, every man there knew the truth. Without Tom and the Queen, they would not have lasted even a single night. The sky above the camp still glowed faintly from the beam of the transmitter. It reached into the heavens like a spear of light, cutting through the endless night. Every soldier stared at it with pride, for they knew it carried one message across the stars. We are here. We are alive. Come for us. The battlefield was quiet now, but the quiet felt heavy. Broken enemy weapons and shattered ground marked the price they had paid. Some men lay wounded, their friends carrying them to shelter. Others collected what little supplies remained. They had survived, yet everyone knew the enemy would return. Tom sat on a broken crate near the base of the tower. His hands were scraped, his face lined with dust, but his eyes held fire. He had finished the work. He had done the impossible. Still, doubt gnawed at him. The Queen's words echoed in his mind. My husband. He looked at her now. She stood a few paces away, her silver cloak torn, her strength slowly returning. Even weary, she looked like a figure carved from power and grace. The soldiers avoided her eyes, unsure of what she truly was. Some whispered that she was both savior and danger. Paul approached Tom, his rifle resting across his shoulder. You did it, he said simply. Tom nodded. For now. Paul sat beside him. His expression was hard, but his voice was low. Listen. The men respect you. They saw what you did. They also saw how she fought beside us. But they do not understand her claim. Some of them think she is using you. Tom looked down at his hands. I don't understand it either. Paul leaned closer. Then figure it out fast. Because if the enemy returns, and our people arrive to see her by your side, they will want answers. We cannot afford doubt in the middle of war. Before Tom could reply, a shout came from the watchtower. Movement in the stars. Every head turned. The soldiers grabbed their rifles, bracing for another wave of enemy ships. But as the night deepened, shapes appeared in the sky that were not enemy black. They were bright, with blue lights across their wings. The camp held its breath. Paul lifted his binoculars, then lowered them slowly. His voice was filled with both shock and relief. Our fleet. They heard us. Cheers rose from the soldiers, weak at first, then stronger. Some raised their rifles to the sky in salute. Others fell to their knees in thanks. For the first time in years, hope felt real. The Queen stepped beside Tom. Her eyes followed the glowing ships as they descended like falling stars. Her voice was calm. Your people arrive. The true test begins. Tom frowned. What do you mean? She did not answer, only watched as the ships landed outside the camp. The earth shook as heavy landing gear pressed into the soil. Ramps opened, and armored figures marched out. Their uniforms were bright with the mark of Earth's fleet. At their front walked a tall officer with sharp eyes and a voice like steel. Commander Ray, Paul whispered. The commander strode into the camp, his soldiers spreading out with perfect discipline. He looked at the men, then at the transmitter, and finally at the Queen. His eyes narrowed. Paul saluted. Sir. We held the tower. The signal was sent. Reinforcements came in time. Commander Ray nodded once. You did well, Captain. His gaze shifted to Tom. And you are the one who fixed it? Tom stood, feeling the weight of so many eyes on him. Yes, sir. I repaired it. The commander studied him, then turned to the Queen. His hand hovered near his sidearm. And what is that? The camp grew tense. Soldiers from Earth aimed their weapons. Paul's men tightened their grips. The Queen did not flinch. She stood tall, her silver cloak falling still, her eyes bright as stars. "She is the reason we survived," Tom said quickly. "She fought with us. She protected the tower." Commander Ray's voice was sharp. "She is no human. She is one of them." The Queen spoke at last, her voice steady. "I am queen of my people, yes. But I stand with him." She pointed to Tom. "And because of him, I now stand with you." The commander looked from her to Tom, his face unreadable. Why would a queen of the enemy call a human her husband? The soldiers whispered. The air was heavy with suspicion. Tom felt his heart pounding. He wanted to deny it, to laugh it away, but the Queen's hand touched his arm. Her eyes held no doubt. "Because it is truth," she said. Commander Ray's jaw tightened. "This is war. We cannot allow confusion about loyalty. If she is with us, she must prove it." The Queen raised her head. "Then I will. For the enemy is not done. They will return in greater force. But if you stand with me, I will show you the path to victory." The commander studied her for a long moment, then finally lowered his hand from his sidearm. "Very well. You have one chance. But if you betray us, nothing will save you." Paul exhaled slowly. The tension eased slightly, though unease still lingered. The rest of the night was filled with movement. Earth soldiers set up new defenses, unloading heavy weapons from their ships. The camp turned into a fortress of steel and firepower. Drones scanned the horizon, and towers were raised. For the first time, the humans had numbers and strength. Tom walked alone near the edge of the camp. The Queen followed, her steps silent. He stopped at last and turned to her. "Why me? Why did you call me your husband in front of everyone?" She looked at him, her face calm but her voice soft. "Because you are different. When others saw me as threat, you saw me as ally. When others doubted, you trusted. When I spoke, you listened. My people believe in strength, but you showed me another kind. That bond cannot be broken." Tom shook his head. "But I am just a mechanic." Her hand touched his chest, resting over his heart. "You are more. And in time, you will see it too." He had no answer. Her words struck deep, leaving him silent. The next morning brought new alarms. Scouts reported enemy fleets gathering beyond the mountains. Hundreds of ships, more than the humans had ever faced. Commander Ray called a council inside the command tent. Maps and screens lit the table. Paul, Tom, and the Queen stood among the officers. "The enemy knows we signaled for help," Ray said. "They want to crush us before the full fleet can arrive. We must hold this world until reinforcements from Earth reach us. That will take days, maybe weeks." The Queen stepped forward. "You cannot face them in open field. Their numbers will overwhelm you. But I know their weakness. I know how they fight, for I once led them." The officers shifted uneasily. Ray narrowed his eyes. "Speak." She pointed to the mountains. "Their fleet will hide there, waiting to strike. But if you destroy their supply ships, their army will starve. Without fuel, without food, their numbers mean nothing." The room was silent. Then Paul nodded slowly. "She is right. A strong army without supply is nothing but a shadow." Ray crossed his arms. "And how do we reach their supply ships?" The Queen looked to Tom. "He will lead us." Tom's eyes widened. Me. You understand machines, she said. You repaired the transmitter when no one else could. The enemy ships are machines as well. With your hands, you can break them. The officers exchanged doubtful glances. Ray studied Tom for a long moment, then sighed. Very well. You will join the strike team. If this works, we gain time. If it fails, we are finished. That night, Tom prepared with the soldiers. He was given a small pack of tools, nothing more. No rifle, no heavy armor. He felt out of place among the warriors, yet the queen stayed close. She spoke no more about husbands or destiny, only gave him silent strength with her presence. Before dawn, the strike team set out across the dark plain. Enemy patrols flew overhead, but the queen cloaked them with her silver light, bending shadows around them. They moved unseen, guided by her knowledge. At last, the team reached the mountains. Beyond, in the valley, the enemy supply ships rested. Huge black vessels, glowing with faint red lines, filled the field like sleeping beasts. Tom stared at them, his stomach tight. How do we destroy them? The queen's eyes met his. Not with fire. With your hands. He understood then. His tools. His skill. His mind. He was not just a soldier to her. He was the key. Taking a deep breath, Tom moved into the valley, his tools ready. Behind him, the queen and the soldiers waited in silence. The war was far from over, but the first true counter-strike was about to begin.